This was by far the worst book that I've read this year. Hey, what's up, my book babes, and welcome back on my channel. I thought we're just gonna do a wrap up of all the books that I've read in 2024, which were, I think, 64 in total. And I'm just gonna go quickly through all of the books and tell you if they are worth reading, how I rated them, and maybe which tropes are included. Let's go. Here we already have my first book, which was The Graham Effect. I absolutely love this book. I did not expect this, but Elle Kennedy never disappoints. I rated this of 5 out of 5 stars. Loved it, definitely worth it to read. The next one is The Predator, and here I'm actually a bit torn because I really wanted to love this book, but I didn't. The thing is, I don't like the third perspective narration, and Runix only writes in this perspective style. It's just not for me. I think I rated this a 2 out of 5 stars. I just couldn't get warm with it, but I think this had potential. Okay, the third book was In Your Wildest Dreams by Rebecca Jenshek. This was such a surprise. I've only seen one TikTok about this book. Absolutely loved this. I had such a great time. I just recently ordered the rest of the series because this is the 4th book from the series. Didn't knew this, but you can also read this as a standalone. If you love ice hockey, go for it because this man is obsessed and I just love when he falls first. My next book was A Game of Fate by Scarlett Sinclair. This is also from the Hades x Persephone saga, but in Hades POV. I mean, I already loved A Touch of Darkness, so I also love this one, 5 out of 5 stars. It's really spicy, and if you love Greek mythology retellings, yes. My next books were Fourth Wing and Iron Flame. I can't wait to now read Onyx Storm once it comes out in like 2 weeks or so. I did not expect to love this book because I'm usually not a fan of dragon and fantasy, but the romance part is great here. And with Iron Flame, in my opinion, this book was just maybe like 150 pages too long. So maybe if it was a bit shorter, I would give this 5 out of 5 stars as well. But read the series, it's totally worth it, even if you're not usually a fantasy or romantasy girl. Okay, we are back to my retellings because Katie Robert is also one of those authors that loves to write like Greek mythology retellings. This one, I don't know the English title. I think the English title is Pure Seduction or something. But this book is about Aphrodite, Hephaestus, Adonis, and Pandora. So we have 4 people. And this book is kinky because all 4 of them are having fun together. The next one was Where's Molly by H.G. Carlton. This is a cat and mouse spin-off. So you first have to read Haunting and Hunting Adeline, and then you can read this because it's about Molly. We already get to know her in Hunting Adeline from like the diary. It's a typical H.G. Carlton book. I had such a fun time reading it. Again, an ice hockey book. This was Breakaway by Grace Riley. Sadly, this was a big fat disappointment. I mean, we started good and I usually like ice hockey books, but this one was just boring. I couldn't feel any chemistry between both protagonists. And I mean, even the smut didn't make it better. Okay, got it. Vienna, Blinding Lights by Lara Holthaus. This is by a German author. Also had such a great time reading it. The plot twist and the cliffhanger. This is kind of like giving Gossip Girl vibes because it's playing in the high society of Vienna. Love Redesigned by Lauren Asher. Lauren Asher is just one of those instant buy offers for me. Also with this book, did not expect to love it as much as I did. Also rated it, I think, a 5 out of 5 stars. I just had such a great time. They are childhood rivals. Okay, Hooked by Emily McIntyre. This is the first book from the Never After series. It's not like a retelling, but a modern version of Captain Hook. It's about like the Disney villains. I mean, it was a really good book, but I expected a bit more since so many people hyped it up. I didn't like the pet name here, but overall, I think this is a solid book if you want to start reading dark romance. Next up is Mile High by Liz Tomford, and I feel like you can't go wrong with sports romances because they're always at least solid or like really, really good. Same here. She's a flight attendant and he's an ice hockey player. We have a curvy FMC. This was also such a fun read. Maybe a bit too long. Maybe this could have been shortened by like 50 pages. Okay, this was one of my most anticipated reads of 2024, A Touch of Chaos by Scarlett Sinclair. We kind of had to wait a few years to get the final book from the series. It was good, but not like outstanding. I mean, The Spice Again was phenomenal. Also a great storyline, but the beginning was a bit confusing because I still had to remember, okay, what was going on in like the last few books since it was already such a long time ago since I read them. Another book by the Queen H.G. Carlton. I read the German version of Does It Hurt? This is a standalone. In my opinion, this is a mix between a dark romance and a thriller. I think this is such a great standalone to read, great spice, but here the storyline was definitely it for me. There was this constant suspense. Now a German book, Myths of Shapeshifters. This was the debut book of the author, and I was a bit scared that this book might be a bit too cheesy, but it wasn't. It turned out to be one of my favorite books of the year. Phenomenal romantasy. Phenomenal. This kind of gave me Selection vibes, so the Selection series by Kiera Cass. Love the writing style, 5 out of 5 stars. I really hope that one day this will be translated to English because this is madly underrated. And then I entered the Rereads, and I actually started with God of Malice. And let's just say we started wild because especially the first 3 chapters, holy shit. It was intense. And I don't know why, but this book just stuck in my head, especially Killian Carson. I mean, he's a psychopath, like deadass psychopath, but he turned out to be one of my favorite MMCs from the series. I don't know why. And then I thought, okay, let's just start at the beginning of the Rereads with Cruel King. This is kind of like book 0 from the Royal Elite series. This was also a solid book, but it just wasn't as good as God of Malice. Here we have a bully romance. I wouldn't say that this book was too long, but there was just something missing that gave me the sparks. And that's also why I didn't continue the Royal Elite series for such a long time. So then I moved back to the Legacy of God series, and I started God of Pain. This was actually my least favorite from the Legacy of God series, but I mean, just like all the books from the series are just like so good. This is my favorite Rina Ken series. This book was kinky, okay? It was really kinky. The only thing that I didn't like so much was the mix between Grayton because he's mysterious and silent, and Annika because she's really sunshiny and outgoing, and maybe a bit too much for my taste. Then came out King of Sloth by Ana Huang. I was super excited for this book because every Ana Huang book, I'll read it. And this book was just like a tiny disappointment for my taste. I mean, just like thinking about the Twisted series and especially King of Wrath, we had more of like morally gray characters, and here, how do I say it? It was a bit boring and cringy sometimes, especially the spice. I didn't like the spice here. I like both protagonists, maybe not together. And then I started my Luna Mason journey with the Beneath the Secret series, and the first book was Chaos. And I devoured it in such a short time. I love the short chapters, and the spice is always phenomenal. So if you're looking for a great time reading a book where the storyline isn't like too complex, but we still have a storyline, this is your book. Another Scarlett Sinclair book, A Game of Retribution. This is the second book after A Game of Fate. And one thing that I liked about Hades' POV is that we get more insights, because sometimes when we're getting a book in his POV, I feel like it's pointless and we don't get any new information, but here it was definitely worth it. And then I went back to the Legacy of God series, so God of Wrath by Rina Kent. This was also a highlight because Cecily Knight is just such a mood. She's one of my favorite FMCs. And if you loved Haunting Adeline, you should definitely read this book because it has a lot of similarities, because he's also a stalker. We're having this cat and mouse game, also a gun scene. I rated this of 5 out of 5 stars. Next book from the series, God of Ruin. This book is about Landon and Mia. I have to say that I expected a bit more from Landon because I thought this would be like really kinky in some way. And I mean, it was also really spicy and dark, but maybe I expected just something a bit different. And then this book was an absolute highlight. I mean, so many of you told me that I absolutely loved God of Fury, and you were totally right. This might be my favorite book of 2024. I also recommended it to a friend and she loved it as well. She also got a tattoo for it, so I mean, we're both obsessed with this book. Nikolai Sokolov is my favorite MMC of the series. I just love everything about this man, and this storyline was just like an emotional roller coaster. Just read it, 5 out of 5 stars. This is my favorite book from the Legacy of God series, and nothing will ever compare to this. This is an MM romance. And then I started a book that was also a highlight, my romantasy highlight of the year, Powerless. I mean, Kai Esser, he's a freaking poet, okay? I can say it over and over again. This book is phenomenal. There's not even spice, but their chemistry together. Also love Peyton Gray, strong FMC, phenomenal. And right after this book, I read Powerful, which is a novella. This is about Peyton's friend, Adina. We already know, based from Powerless, how her story will end, but just like reading it was heartbreaking, okay? It was just heartbreaking to read all the stuff, knowing how this will end. And then it was time to end the Legacy of God series because I got an ARC by Rina Can of God of War. And I just say I was confused because I never read a book with amnesia. There are some other books by Rina Can that have the amnesia trope. And with this book, the storyline was just, a bit confusing, but in a good way due to all the plot twists and so on. And once everything comes together, you'll understand it. Because at first I hated Eli King. I was like such an asshole. But once everything comes together, you'll understand it. And then I did a reread of my favorite book of all time. I did the German version, the one with the sprayed edges. Haunting Adeline. For real, this book is my Roman Empire. I think about this book every day. I also want to get a Haunting Adeline tattoo, but I'm not sure what to get yet because I don't want something that already exists. This is one of the best dark romance books out there. If you haven't read it, read it. I first read this over 2.5 years ago, and let's just say I was a bit traumatized because it was kind of like my first dark romance books back then. But once you reread it, no book will ever compare with this one. Then I went back to the Windy City series and I started a Right Move, so the second book. And I like this even more than Mahai, so I rated this 5 out of 5 stars. I just love Ryan and Indy. Indy is just such a sweetheart. I love her, both of them together. He's a bit grumpy and she's the sunshine. We also have a best friend's brother and he's an NBA player, so sports romance again, obviously. Next up, Bloody Heart by Sophie Lark. I already read the first 3 books from the Brutal Birthright series. My favorite were the first 2. And I thought, okay, let's continue the series. And this book was okay. It's kind of like a second chance because they're meeting like 9 years later or something. There's also a trope included that I usually don't like, but I liked it here. It was heartbreaking sometimes. There was just this bark missing for me. Birthday Girl by Penelope Douglas. So many recommended to me. I feel like this is the OG age gap book. And I'm a bit disappointed, okay? She gets cheated on by her boyfriend and they live at her boyfriend's dad. So Jordan and her ex-boyfriend's dad start something, if you know what I mean. I just wish that the spice would have been a bit better because this had a lot of potential. The first few spicy scenes, I wasn't feeling it. And to be honest, there were just so many unlikable characters in here. Yeah, they are part of the storyline and are kind of like important, but it made it hard to like this book. Okay, the second book from the Myths of Shapeshifter series. I already showed you the first one. This is also in German, obviously, since it's by a German author. Also really loved this. Everything comes together and it didn't disappoint. The focus wasn't so much on a romance as in the first book, which I'm actually a bit sad about because I just wish that we would have gotten a bit more romance, but it's okay. It's getting messy behind me. My next book was Reckless, so the next book after Powerless. I obviously love both protagonists, but the only thing that kind of turned me off with this book is that it felt like the storyline was running in circles, which threw me off a bit, but the chemistry between both of them was just phenomenal. We're finally getting a bit of romance and a cliffhanger here. I can't wait for Fearless, which will be the third book in the series. Still, you have to read it. Kai Esser, he's a poet. Next up, Butcher and Blackbird. This is a dark rom-com and I had such a fun time reading it. Both of them are rival murderers. We're having a friends to lovers and Sloane and Rowan are just like having such a great energy together. I had such a fun time and this is also great if you want to start reading dark romance. This is also a book by a German author. Bloody Pledge, this is Mafia, but I have to say that I didn't like this book. Not at all, sadly. I just didn't understand the storyline because since there are like twins involved, I didn't get it. I just didn't understand it. It was a bit weirdly written in my opinion. That's also why I had to ask them, okay, what happened? Back to Rina Kent, then I started the Monster Trilogy. This is the first one, this is the second, this is the third one. Wow. With Legacy of Gods, definitely my favorite series. I love both protagonists. She pretends to be a man in the military. And the whole setting was just really, really good. And also Kirill, book Man Goals. The storyline was phenomenal. We have Russian Mafia. Another book by a German author, Escape. This is the first book from the series. It has academia setting. It was just really interesting to find out because there are like a few men involved. Okay, who's the bad one, who's the good one, which one will she choose. Solid. I already showed you Love Redesign, and the next book is Love Unwritten. I also rated this 5 out of 5 stars. I was a bit scared to read it since this book is really thick. I think this has like nearly 700 pages, but I enjoyed every page. We have a single dad and she's the nanny, and it was just really sweet to read. Then I started the Sinners Anonymous series by Summer Sketcher because so many of you recommended it to me. It is Mafia, and I was really looking forward to read this book. I mean, even though this book isn't thick, I kind of had a hard time getting through it because just like the layout of this book was a bit weird and like not relaxing to read. And when it comes to the storyline, I mean, it was good, but I expected a bit more. And also that the FMC always said like bird phrases or something. I don't know, it was just a bit weird in my opinion. And then I did a reread of Hunting Adeline, also the German version. I mean, yeah, the book hits more when you read it for the first time. I mean, I already knew what will happen, but still, phenomenal book. I think I might like Hunting Adeline even more than Haunting because I feel like the connection between Eddie and Sade is just stronger, and how Sade treats Eddie, like with everything that happened. I mean, phenomenal book. As I already said, Cat and Mouse Set is my Roman Empire. Then Collide by Bal Cabra. This is pretty similar to Icebreaker. So yeah, I kind of compared Collide with Icebreaker. In my opinion, Icebreaker is just like a bit better, but this one was also a solid book. I rated this a 4 out of 5 stars. Also had a great time. We have an ice hockey player. I think she's his tutor or something. I'm not quite sure. Daydream by Hannah Grace. I mean, I loved Icebreaker. I loved Wildfire. And I have to say Daydream was maybe just like a bit disappointing in my opinion. This is like super sweet, maybe too sweet for my taste. It has really less spice in comparison to the other two books. And I mean, yeah, it fitted to both protagonists. Just it wouldn't fit like if both of them would like F in like every second chapter. I get it. But it was just a bit boring for my taste. It was a bit forgettable. And now Vienna Hiding Darkness, like the second book from the series. And I really wanted to know how the storyline continues, like after the cliffhanger, plot twist, whatever. Love how this story came together and everything. I probably like the first one a bit more. Again, some Elle Kennedy books. I finally started the Briar You series. The first one is The Chase. Loved it. Summer's a great FMC. She's the sister of Dean De Laurentiis from The Score. This is really funny. And the next one was The Risk. And I still have to read the fourth book from the series, but I think this will be my favorite from Briar You because we're having fake dating. Brenna is a baddie, okay? She's a great FMC. Also Jake, both of them together, their tension. I mean, fake dating. Love it. 5 out of 5 stars. I mean, you guys know that I love Luna Mason, and I haven't read the second book yet due to some incidences, but I read the third book, Crave by her, and this is definitely my favorite book from the series. Lara and Alexi. Wow. It is a friends to lovers, but both of them together is just phenomenal. I love the storyline. We're getting some hand necklace action. I had a fun time reading it. I've read this in under 24 hours. I mean, what else to say? Read it. Then I went back to the Briar You series, so the play. I also had a fun time reading it. Maybe it wasn't my favorite from the series. So far, this is like my third place. I have to say this book was just a bit forgettable in my opinion. I know that it was about Demi and Hunter, and I really liked Hunter in the previous books and also here, but I feel like this had a bit more potential. And then a book that I was also really looking forward to read, and maybe 2024 just wasn't my Ana Huang book year, but The Striker, I'm sorry. This was a huge disappointment. I just didn't like it. This book was way too long. This book should be shortened by at least 150 pages, in my opinion. I also didn't like both protagonists together. I didn't like Scarlett. She was unlikable in my opinion. I mean, Asher Donovan, he's okay, but I just couldn't feel a chemistry. I don't know why, but that just wasn't it for me. By the way, this was a sports romance. He's a soccer player. Now, a book. This was definitely my surprise of the year. The Pawn and the Puppet. I did not expect to like it as much as it did. The setting is just great. I love Destiny. He's just such a mysterious character. This is not like a typical dark romance because there isn't even spice in the first book. It's also dystopian. He's having a personality disorder or something. I don't know the English word. I loved the tension, 5 out of 5 stars, and I'm currently reading the second book from the series. Now, this book got recommended to me by another blogger. It is Songs for the Beautiful. It's by a German author. It is about a girl that gets a record label, and just like hearing about all the stuff that this girl has to go through in the music industry. I mean, we know that it's not easy there, but wow, it was so well written. 5 out of 5 stars. I can't wait for the second book. Little Stranger. I've seen a lot of TikToks about this book and I had high hopes. I hope that this book will be like Kill Switch, so Damon Torrance kind of like, but this book was one of the worst books that I've read in a long time. And I have to give this book 0 out of 5 stars because it was just so bad, okay? The storyline, terrible. Is there even a storyline? I don't know. Both protagonists are just childish. They are stepbrother and sister, so not blood related because both of them got adopted. But I just absolutely hated both of them. They have no character. They're just like so flat. The spice was terrible, okay? I didn't enjoy it. I mean, if you want to put a screwdriver up her, go for it. But I just didn't like it. Even ChatGPT would have written a better book. Then I did another reread. It was a reread of Twisted Games. This is definitely my favorite book from the Twisted series. I mean, Reese Larson is just like the standard. He and Bridget together. Oh, 5 out of 5 stars. Also, the spice, phenomenal. I mean, if you haven't read this, what are you even doing? Because this is definitely my favorite Anna Huang book. I already showed you Hooked, and this is now the second book from the series. It is Scar. This is kind of like a retelling version of The Lion King, and I have to say, the first half was okay, but the second half was a bit boring. I feel like with Emily McIntyre books, the second half always gets weaker, which is actually sad because, I mean, the setting here, I like it. There were some things that just annoyed me a bit. Then I actually read my first thriller this year by Sebastian Fitzek, Der Seelenbrecher. The English version is called The Soul Breaker, if I'm right. I didn't know what to expect and I was madly confused for like at least the first half of the book. It was just confusing. I didn't know what happened. It was just weird to read a book in a third perspective narration since I haven't read one in a long time, but I mean, it makes sense here. And once everything comes together, it's just like phenomenally written. I definitely want to read more thrillers. This one I rated 3.5 out of 5 stars. I think I just have to get into this genre more. This book was also a surprise, Kiss the Right Bride by Daniela Hartig. Sadly, the author doesn't live anymore, but this book was so well written. We're having a second chance and she's a wedding planner and she's actually planning the wedding for her ex. And I just love the writing style here. Also, we're having short chapters, writing style phenomenal. I just had a fun time reading it. It's by a German author, so sadly it isn't available in English right now, but yeah, great book. And then I continued the Sinners Anonymous series, and the second book is Sinners Condemned, and the first one is Sinners Consumed. Both of these books are about the same couple, so the storyline continues, and I just love this couple so much more than the one from Sinners Anonymous. Raphael and Penny together are just amazing. She's kind of like giving Jules Ambrose vibes from Twisted Hate. She's sassy and he's also to die for. He's a rich mafia boss. I added these to my list of my favorite mafia books. Okay, now the last 3 books and then we're finally over with all the books. Deviant King, Steel Princess, and Twisted Kingdom, also by Rena Kent. These are kind of like the start of the Royal Elite series, but first you have to read Cruel King and then you can read these. These are about Aiden and Elsa. Love their story. I didn't expect to love it as much as I did, but I definitely see like, because I already read the books about their children, I see where they're getting like their character traits from, like from their parents. But the storyline here, it starts as a bully romance, but he's just madly obsessed. And the storyline here was just so good. And once everything comes together, you understand why Aiden acted the way he did. And it's just super sweet. I mean, 5 out of 5 stars. Hates me while editing. I actually realized that I did not film my outro because it already got dark outside. So I'm sorry. But I hope that you liked this video and maybe got some inspirations for new book recs. Yeah, I can't wait for all the books that I'll read in 2025. Maybe let me know which your highlights were that you read in 2024. If you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. Also follow my channel. I'll try to be more active here. I'll also link down below my Goodreads, where I'll always track all the books that I've read and also giving like short reviews. So yeah, see you next time.